Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Asano Zobi. I am a grad worker at the School of Criminal Justice at Rutgers, Newark, and I'm a proud member of RU AAUP-AFT. The last year or so has been pretty grueling. It's been pretty difficult for a multitude of reasons. And the folks that are going to be speaking today, they're the ones who know what's been going on. They're the ones who understand the intricacies of what's going on. I'm not going to take up too much time at the front end. I'm going to ask folks to limit their speech to 3 to 5 minutes. Jacob's going to be in the chat and he'll gently nudge us along. And I'll start this going with Christine O'Connell. Christine O'Connell is the president of the Union of Rutgers Administrators, AFT, and she's been affiliated with Rutgers since 2009. Thank you, Christine.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming today. I just have a few remarks. We are still in the middle of a global pandemic. We all have been struggling through this unprecedented health crisis together. Many of us have been forced to grieve through the loss of our family members, our friends, our colleagues. And for those who are fortunate enough and haven't experienced a passing, have had to adjust to a more restrictive world. Through this crisis, Rutgers continues to move forward successfully without a significant reduction in student enrollment and additional millions of dollars of federal and state aid to bolster its coffers, not to mention the hundreds of millions of dollars that has grown in their unrestricted reserve accounts. Its success is due to no small measure of the work that staff does every day in every academic department that serves students and faculty, in every business department that keeps the bills paid, in every program that serves a community across the state of New Jersey, like 4-H, FNEP, Small Business Development Center, and many more. Yet, we are also experiencing unprecedented number of layoffs that have devastated hundreds of staff members and their families while Rutgers continues to succeed. Hundreds of people have lost their jobs, their source of income, their medical benefits, and tuition remission for both themselves and their families because of the choices that Rutgers makes while they do not consider alternatives to their cruelty. Rutgers' decision to lay people off instead of prioritizing people and their needs during a global pandemic is a cruel one and cowardly. The coalition of Rutgers unions offered a practical solution which would have benefited everyone, management and worker, while keep helping the most and doing the least harm. We offered to help save them over $100 million and continue to make that offer while they continue to delay. Instead, Rutgers University chooses to corporatize education and do the most harm by laying the most vulnerable off, many with decades of service and many who already lived check to check. We stand together, staff, faculty, grad students, the community of Rutgers, to assert that Rutgers works because we work. Not one of us are disposable. We are the backbone of this university, and everything we do is vital to the operations of this school. But we are also invisible, marginalized, overlooked, and undervalued. The expectation that everything will continue to operate seamlessly and services provided to students, faculty, and the community will be as robust without the hundreds that have been laid off is a false narrative. When you devastate lives, there is not only a human cost, not only to those who lose their income and benefits, but to Rutgers and its core mission to teaching, research, and service at the highest levels. Rutgers can and should do better. We, together, commit to helping them do so if they allow us to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine, for your remarks. We couldn't do this work without you guys before the pandemic, and we cannot do this work without you guys now. Next, I'll be introducing Josh Bezzy. Josh is a member of the PTL FC AAUP-AFT. Josh is a part-time lecturer in the Rutgers writing program, and they were laid off at the end of the fall semester after 10 semesters as a PTL. They first began teaching in the writing program in 2007 as a graduate student, and they received their PhD in English at Rutgers in fall 2016. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. So I just want to begin by saying that I love Rutgers. As was mentioned, I am a proud Rutgers alum. I received my PhD in English at Rutgers. I began teaching in the writing program as a graduate student in 2007. And since then, I've taught 10 semesters as a PTL. And I keep coming back because I love teaching Rutgers students. I choose to teach even when the work of teaching is undervalued, and unfortunately, it often is. I love Rutgers, but Rutgers is now choosing to devalue its educators. Over the decades, the administration has devalued educators by replacing secure and permanent positions with more and more PTL positions, effectively pushing us educators into precarious, underpaid working conditions. Now, Rutgers devalues educators by casting us off in the middle of a recession. Last semester, after supporting students throughout the spring and fall semesters of the pandemic, we learned from an unceremonious email that PTLs would be laid off. Despite efforts by full-time faculty to stand by PTLs and reverse this, Dean March stood by the decision. I am now unemployed, navigating the seemingly endless red tape of New Jersey unemployment and unsure of how to move forward. I want to continue teaching. I love teaching, but it's now unclear what my future holds. We who've worked loyally for the university for many years have been treated as disposable and unwanted. I've looked to Rutgers not only for my livelihood, I'm invested in Rutgers and the student body. I love teaching English and writing in Rutgers, and I'm good at it because I've done it for more than a decade. So why would Rutgers lay off people so dedicated to the university? If this was about job performance, it would be understandable, but I personally have received glowing reviews from my students and from my supervisors. That's not the excuse being given. Dean March has used COVID and the recession as a cover to lay off PTLs as a way to balance the budget. But how is laying off underpaid educators like me a meaningful way to balance the budget? We do not have to sit idly by as if the purging of PTLs were inevitable. President Holloway should not sit on his hands as educators at Rutgers are being devalued and as loyal workers are being humiliated. This is offensive and hurtful. We are real people. We have real qualifications, and we need to speak up for educators who work on the front lines. We're living in a time when the fabric of our democracy is being eroded. We can continue to stand by and watch it happen, but I say we need to value education as a civic good. To do that, we need to start valuing our educators. President Holloway, I hope you can hear this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. We have another member of the PTL FC, sorry, AAUP-AFT, Tom Decker. Tom is not here with us today. Tom has a day job, so we'll be streaming a video of his. He's a part-time lecturer in the Rutgers writing program. Tom was also laid off for the fall semester after teaching every semester since the fall of 2014. Alan, I don't think we're getting the audio. All right. We'll move on to the next speaker until we can figure out our audio situation. Next up, we have Ella Miller. Elle is a member of the Union of Rutgers Administrators AFT and a library associate in the New Brunswick campus. Elle has worked at Rutgers for 17 years. Thank you so much, Elle.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here and am pleased to be able to speak I work in access services, and recently, as January 28th, we received news that we would be required to return to work full-time, ending our A and B week schedules. Originally in July, we were put on A and B week schedules so that we would diminish the contact between us and maintain the protocols in place to keep us all safe. And the other part of that is if somebody on a team week A or B was diagnosed with COVID-19 and had to they had to shut that week down, then we would still have people that could come in and work the other weeks. We did not want to stop working to fulfill the needs of library staff, library users at Rutgers University. Everything we have done has been to support Rutgers University and Rutgers University students, faculty, and staff. We have incorporated new ways of working, new methods of delivering the materials that people want. But on the 28th, we were told we would be required to end our A and B weeks and come back to working full-time with each other. Now, no protocols were mentioned when we were told this. We were not told how any of these things would happen. And how do you maintain 6-foot difference in an office where we are working in a cubicle? How do you maintain the health protocol for all staff when in reality, the cleaning and sterilization and disinfection of the areas had not been happening on a regular basis? It's one thing to have all of those things, say we're doing them, and it's another thing to have it not be done. So our concern for all of us was the safety of all of the employees and being able to do the work that we had been hired to do. So we wrote a letter in joint with faculty and staff, and we were able to set that back. So it didn't happen, but that doesn't mean it can't happen in the future, because we don't know what the future holds. And I just wanted to let people know that the libraries is here to do the job we can do. And we do it well. And without us, I don't know what Rutgers University would be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elle. We would be nothing without y'all, that's for sure. We're gonna go back to Tom and hear what he has to say. Thank you so much.
I'm afraid that didn't work. Yep, sorry.
That's all right. Thank you so much, Alan. We'll move on. Next up, we have Sarah DeGeorgis. Sarah is a member of the Graduate Steering Committee of Rutgers AAUP-AFT. Sarah is a third-year PhD student in the Department of Public Policy and Administration at Rutgers Camden. Sarah also received a master's degree from the Bullstein School of Planning and Public Policy at Rutgers. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Hi, good afternoon. As Isan said, my name is Sarah DeGeorgis. I'm a third-year PhD student at Rutgers Camden. My research is with public housing residents. My dissertation is about how these residents have experienced the tearing down and rebuilding of their homes. I use in-depth, in-person interviews, since talking about one's home, especially when that home is public housing, can be a very sensitive topic. I cannot do this research remotely. The depth of the interactions are lost, and it's impossible for me to build the trust that I need to with my participants to make them comfortable talking to me. I will also not ask my participants to spend their own money in the form of their cell phone minutes to talk to me that way. And many of them do not have internet at their homes. So Zoom is pretty much out. If the administration gives us inadequate funding or kicks us off our health insurance, it will be impossible for me to finish my degree. Health insurance is always important, but of course, the ongoing pandemic makes it that much more important. I rely on Rutgers health insurance, so does my family. Rutgers needs to give us a universal graduate funding extension so that those of us without family or inherited wealth can finish the degrees that we've worked so hard for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think Sarah did a fantastic job. I've been really fortunate to work with her over the last few months organizing, and Sarah really aptly pointed out how what's been happening and what the Rutgers administration and management have been doing has been replicating, systems of vulnerability and equity in various ways. So next up we have Charles, we don't, all right. Next up we have Amina Ahmed. Amina is an undergraduate at Rutgers, New Brunswick. Amina is studying political science and human resource management with a minor in women and gender studies. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to keep it short and simple. Last time I checked, we're still in a pandemic. This is a time that's compassion is just much needed. Like,
Amina, I apologize. Do you mind just being a little louder?
no, yeah, no problem. Can
Thank
you
you.
hear me better now? Okay, sounds good. So like I said, last time I checked, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, a time where compassion is much needed. It's a time where people need more security, not less, not more stress. And it's unfortunate to see the amount of people who are dealing with these extreme amounts of stress that could easily be resolved. And all I really have to say is that I'm here standing in solidarity with my peers, faculty, staff alike, and to demand that Rutgers utilize its resources to its utmost ability. Because at the end of the day, if we decide to have a people-centered approach, that not only would that further help faculty and staff, but that would translate to students and students' performance at the university. And I want to just say thank you to all the faculty, staff, and even my peers that have inspired me during this time. Your strength and your solidarity helps me continue in this fight, and I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. We can definitely learn from the organizing that undergrads have done over the last few months. They have been tenacious in the face of every decision that Rutgers University has made in this last year. So thank you so much, and we appreciate having you here today. Next up, we have Nicholas LaBelle. Nicholas is president of Rutgers University Student Assembly, and an undergraduate at Rutgers, New Brunswick, majoring in economics and business analytics information technology. Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you, Ishan, and thank you for everyone for sharing your stories today and your testimony. Christine, Josh, Amna, really means a lot to me as well, and I've heard a lot from you in pretty similar circumstances. So, as talked about in my capacity this year as student body president, we've done a lot of work to help those that are currently in need. And as Amna so eloquently put, the pandemic is still happening. It's real. It's affecting us all. For reference, those that might not know, we were the first school in the country to set up a recovery fund from a student government. Before Congress acted with the CARES Act, before any other school in the nation, at Rutgers did that here because we acknowledged the need to help those most vulnerable and act accordingly. So you had, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, myself, I was 21 at the time, working to, provide capital funding to folks who couldn't pay for the rent, couldn't pay for food, because if students can't eat, students can't learn. Students have to worry about, paying where they want to live, like Sarah mentioned with housing. They can't learn. It's a pretty simple equation. It's not that mathematical. If you can't eat, you can't learn, you can't study, you can't do well in your performance as an academic person. So just, that being said, I just want to kind of remind the folks here that, this pandemic is real, really showing that we have to be a united front, showing that we have, innovative policymakers here at Rutgers that want to make change. And we know that there are smart folks in this call and across the university that have proposed adequate and workable solutions to these problems. And the solution should be addressed and acknowledged as such. And I want to address some points that was brought up by the audience. So, talking about our PTLs. So for the folks that don't know, PTLs are the lifeblood of most academic institutions and, really work with student classes. So we have a joke, as students, like the person grading your test is probably a PTL. The person working on, other things and like keeping your academic career functioning is a PTL. And if you cut these vital people, we have to acknowledge that one, it's not good for their outcomes because they are hurt people and deserve respect as such. But furthermore, if we come back as a university in the following semester and we've let go some of our top talent, we are losing our capacity to educate and be a university. And I think it's pretty, to share a personal story, one of my good friends was a PTL, Professor Watterson. He had taught for more than 20 years at Rutgers, and I had various students begging me, Nick, please keep him his job. He's helped me with life advice. He's helped me with, personal issues. He's written a letter of recs. And this person, this is not a joke. This single-handedly, this, PTL has probably benefited thousands of students over his lifespan at Rutgers. And that is an incalculable benefit to the university. And to have it drilled down to a number by executive deans is not responsible or something we can really appreciate. And then as mentioned prior with grad students, I'm an undergrad, but I'm here to speak on the graduate students as well. And I had folks email me before this meeting, like, Nick, please bring this up because we are struggling. We need the extensions. We need this help from the university because we love Rutgers and we want to finish our degrees and maybe even come back and teach at this university. So we don't want to damage those that want to help our institution, but not acknowledging their value and promoting them as the people that they are. And so to kind of put that in more simple terms, there's something called the Knights Call at Rutgers, which is 4 main values: responsible, resilient, inclusive, and authentic. So I'd like to ask the folks here, is it responsible to lay off those most in need? That answer is pretty obvious. Is it inclusive to keep those that are most vulnerable of different people of color communities out of our university? You can answer that for yourselves. Is it authentic to our mission statement as a university to hurt education and educational outcomes? And finally, is it resilient? We could argue that, the resilience being shown has been by these PTLs and grad students who have been suffering the most and showing up for it. So, it's really a great way to keep that in mind for those that are making decisions, to acknowledge our own statements of, inclusivity, responsibility, authenticity, and resilience, because otherwise our words mean nothing. And we have to keep that in mind. And as a final point, Rutgers is a long institution. We've had a storied history. We're a colonial college. We've made a lot of mistakes in our past, made a lot of things right in our past. This is a unique moment in the historical narrative. We are going to recall this as a pre and post-pandemic outcome. We have the option to be on the right side of history. Let's be on that option. Thank you.
Nicholas, wow, thank you so much. You did an incredible job at highlighting what everyone's been experiencing and really contextualizing what everyone's been experiencing. So thank you. Next up, we're going to have Charles Dismukes. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced your name. Charles is a member of Rutgers AAUP-AFT. He is a distinguished professor of chemistry and chemical biology, and he started teaching at Rutgers in 2009. Thank you, Charles.
I hope you can hear me. Yes, I'm a new member of the union, and I've been at Rutgers for about 11 years. I moved up from a very stable and happy experience as a professor at Princeton University to join Rutgers because I believe in its mission, that mission in higher education for all, as well as research in service of the national needs and service for our community. I still believe in that mission. With that in mind, I took up the task of drafting a petition on behalf of 23 faculty members and their students and other students who are served by the Instrument Design and Fabrication Shop, which is a core facility at Rutgers University, often called the machine shop, but it's anything but a machine shop. It actually is there to design the next set of, or imagine and design and build the next set of scientific instruments and advanced manufacturing tools. So it's a core facility for teaching our students as well as conducting research. In October, the university fired a machinist. The machine shop had been in the had a serious backlog and had hired a young engineering student who forgoed his education in order to take on that position back in, I believe, March. So in less than 6 months, he was fired. For no reason, there was no consultation with the staff, there was no consultation with the faculty, and so he was dismissed. Despite the fact that there was a huge backlog in work in that shop, more than 6 months backlog, 20 jobs in the queue, large contracts with Brookhaven. So absolutely no justification for releasing that individual. The shop had actually had something like 7 full-time machinists and people with experience in electronics and optics through the early 90s. It had been allowed to decrease down to 2 people, whereupon they then hired this young engineering student back in March, as I mentioned. The fact that he was dismissed was never explained to students or faculty. So as a result of the spiraling fall in the shop access and services, Rutgers is really no longer capable of delivering the services on technical grants and contracts that its faculty is capable of competing for. So as a result, the lost income and soured morale of the faculty have grown over the years as a direct consequence of SAS's unwillingness to support this most fundamental need of all experimental science and engineering disciplines. Indeed, Rutgers is going in the opposite direction from the federal agencies, which are sponsoring many new research opportunities in advanced manufacturing, both out of DOE and NSF programs. So Rutgers is really operating in direct defiance of the national needs as defined by these agencies. There existed a student shop operated out of this central fabrication facility. It was closed actually years ago as far as a certified shop and training program. It has only had ad hoc training since that time, but it's closed now to Rutgers students. It's no longer teaching students how to build instruments or modify manufacturing systems. Prior to closing, the shop was understaffed and unable to offer any kind of a certified program to the needy students. So we now know that graduate students and undergraduate researchers are now back on campus, but Rutgers has still cut off their access to this critical resource. And as I mentioned, eliminated the certified training years ago. So Rutgers really should be leading this critical need in student education. I know that our undergraduates are desperately in need of internships that have meaningful experiences, training, and so forth. They're competing for jobs outside and don't have firsthand laboratory experience. Many of them are trying to get into graduate programs and they don't have internships that indicate that they are worth making a risk on. It has very serious consequences on their future. So I would submit that Rutgers is acting in a very frivolous or careless way in the firing of this machinist, and that the bigger picture over the course of decades is one in which they have reduced our ability to act as research scientists to serve the research needs of the country, as well as the local services of the community. So I would submit to President Holloway that this petition, which was filed, was rejected by the Office of SAS as of yesterday. All of the requests, including the consideration of rehiring or hiring of the new machinist, as well as changing in the governance of how that decision was made. And they also rejected the request for consideration of the voices from other departments which rely on that shop beyond the 23 or so faculty that I represent here. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, for highlighting just one of the many ways Rutgers University's arbitrary decisions have impacted folks. I want to highlight a comment that Christine O'Connell dropped in the chat. The machinist was a URA member. Decisions to lay off harm more than those directly impacted, but harm the research mission of Rutgers. Thank you, Christine. Next up, we have Dr. Tulsi Patel. Dr. Tulsi is a member of the Committee of Interns and Residents at SCIU and a resident physician in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at the Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School in Newark. Thank you, Dr. Patel.
Hi, everybody. Just a little bit more about CIR. CIR is the largest resident physician union in the country. We represent over 1,500 doctors in training across the state. Our members work up to 80 hours a week in the front lines of hospitals and clinics caring for patients and communities throughout New Jersey. So as we all know, I'm going to echo a lot of the main points that have been made. Rutgers declared this fiscal emergency in anticipation of losing money. They used this fiscal emergency to freeze salaries and lay off over 1,000 employees in the midst of this global pandemic, robbing folks of their employer-based health insurance and of their financial security. We knew months ago, as we know now, that the work share proposal offered by the CREW, the Coalition of Unions, would allow for fewer layoffs and increased savings. Rutgers preaches fiscal austerity, but continues to ignore the most financially advantageous plan that we know of. Rehiring adjunct faculty and providing grad students with extensions could easily be covered by using just 1% to 2% of the university's unrestricted emergency reserves, and would certainly cost them less than the deficit caused by the athletics department this year. Even though my union specifically has settled with Rutgers and our 3% salary raise was recently restored, we stand in solidarity with our colleagues who have not yet been offered anything fair during arbitration with the university. In declaring this fiscal emergency and in maintaining it, Rutgers demonstrated their willingness to violate multiple contracts for meager savings. We have to demand that they respect every contract with every employee now in order to ensure that they continue to do so well into the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patel, and thank you for highlighting just how nonsensical some of these financial decisions have been, and for showing how strong the coalition of Rutgers Union stands together. Next up, we have Justin O'Hay. Justin is co-president of Health Professionals and Allied Employees Local 5089, and Justin is a clinician at Rutgers University Behavioral Healthcare. Thank you, Justin.
Hi, everybody. I just want to say that HPAE is proud to stand with our coalition of Rutgers Union's family as we urge Rutgers University to protect the jobs of thousands of workers. We've been trying to bargain in good faith with Rutgers University since last May over this manufactured financial crisis. Again, I want to say that manufactured financial crisis. We offered them a deal that could have saved them over $100 million and hundreds of jobs of our members. They refused to take that offer. Instead, they laid off over 100 mental health and healthcare clinicians and case managers at a time where the demand for our services is at a premium. All of this could have been prevented. Our members have been buckling under the pressure of drastically reduced staffing levels, as well as increased demands for care. Rutgers had the money to prevent all of this from happening, but instead they used it as an opportunity to reduce our ranks to skeleton crews, contributing to further employee burnout and turnover during a health and mental health emergency. Our most vulnerable community members are left to deal with longer waits, slower response times, and lower quality care as a result. At minimum, Rutgers must do more to ensure the job security of these health professionals so that those most at need will have accessible medical and mental health services when they're in such dire need, as well as to reduce the risk of worse workforce failure under these prolonged and strenuous conditions. Our front lines need some level of security while we do the often thankless, stressful, and protracted labor of navigating through this public health, mental health, and addictions crisis. Again, we stand here in solidarity with everybody in this room and everybody within the Rutgers Coalition of Unions. And we're here to just in a call for justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Justin. We appreciate the work y'all do so much. Next up, we have Jennifer Garcia. Jennifer is a community organizer with New Labor, a New Jersey social justice organization.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Jennifer, and I'm an organizer with New Labor. So many of you do know that New Labor is an organization that organizes and educates low-wage workers. But throughout this pandemic, our very busy work schedules has also included to help our community with mutual aid and also with helping with dangerous workplaces conditions. There has been many complaints due to COVID-19, and we have been in the front lines helping our community. And when the pandemic started last year in March, New Labor and organizations in New Brunswick, we got together and created a petition in order to force the mayor to have nearby COVID-19 testing. And until May, there was nearby COVID-19 testing, and that couldn't be done without the help of all the organizations that helped us with that petition. And it's just a shame because the mayor doesn't listen to the community, but we also do have to keep in mind that Rutgers University is also part of the community. So as Rutgers being the largest employer, as of today, we know that they also developed the first COVID-19 saliva test. So that was not readily available for the community until some time after. And Rutgers is a very special place to children of New Brunswick because they create the future and opportunities for jobs. As also of being an alumni of Rutgers University, Rutgers does have a special place in my life because I have a job and I definitely learned a lot in studying there. But I do see that there's very much inequality in the community because all the people that are working very hard in restaurants, who are working in factories and also in construction, some of the people in our community, they help build the condominiums that Rutgers have. And it's just very unfair that our community still does not have any funds in order for them to lay back on. We know that many employees are getting laid off, but our community, especially the Hispanic community, is at a huge disadvantage because we do not have unemployment insurance or any federal stimulus to fall back on. The community is very important for Rutgers because we help them, but we would also like Rutgers University to implement emergency funds for our community and also for its students because we're all going through this very, very tough problem of not having our jobs and not being able to pay our bills. But also, I do want to go to the point that also Rutgers University, they make all these decisions without the say of the community. And right now we know that the issue of Lincoln Annex is still going on. It's still going on, and it was agreed upon to go on with the project. And Rutgers has stakeholders in there, and also the hospital Robert Wood Johnson. It's just very unfair that children are going to be displaced from their school in order for there to be a new project built. And also, being a student of New Brunswick, I would say that I also did suffer in my education. I didn't directly make it to Rutgers. I transferred to Rutgers because I did not have the grades and also the knowledge to be there as a freshman. So the reason I'm saying is that I had to transfer to a school and learn my own subjects without the help of my parents because they were working, and also without the help of the education at New Brunswick. And it was because I kept moving schools to school from school. And I know that we're learning remotely, but if these students are still going to the same issue of moving from a school to school and being tasked to acclimate to a new environment, they will have more anxiety. And at the end, their grades may suffer, and they also may have problems in making friendships. And I just want to tell Rutgers to think about the decision you made, about going on to this project. Many families here in New Brunswick, they see Rutgers as opportunity. And if you don't give the community the opportunity it needs to strive, then it's very unfair. And our community, we need you more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. New Labor and other social justice organizations have been vital in creating mutual aid networks across New Jersey that have been meeting the material needs and conditions of people around New Jersey. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for sharing, some of the contradictions in Rutgers University's front-facing communication with the public, where we use terms like beloved community when talking about New Jersey residents, when talking about New Brunswick and Newark and Camden residents. And then when in practice, we don't meet those promises. So next up, we have Donna Murch. Donna is an executive council member of the Rutgers Union AAUP-AFT and a People of Color co-chair. As well, Donna is an associate professor of history. She began teaching at Rutgers in 2004.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to start by thanking all of my colleagues and comrades who have spoken. Justin, Jennifer, Nicholas, Joshua, so many powerful things have been said. And I just wanted to provide a few remarks, kind of placing this moment in context and then thinking about where we go from here. So the moment that we're in. So of course, we all know we're in a global pandemic where over 500,000 people have died. Healthcare is more important than it ever has been in our history. And yet Rutgers has laid off 5% of its workforce. So that's over 1,500 people. And all of those people have lost their salaries, their health insurance, and their tuition benefits. So just like letting that sink in, the scale of pain, of economic pain, that the second largest employer in New Jersey has essentially inflicted on its workforce. There are so many different kinds of effects of this pandemic. Of course, as people have spoken about so fluently, the dilemma of our current graduate students who are unable to visit archives to do research, unable to do ethnography and to go do field research, unable to enter labs. It's very difficult to write a PhD dissertation when you can't do research. And we're going on over almost a year and a half now of graduate students being stalled. So whether it's our workforce, our graduate students, and also of course our undergraduates, we know the amount of economic pain that the United States is going through right now. And Rutgers, I've been at Rutgers since 2004, nearly my entire career, and I've chosen to stay here. And one of the reasons is that Rutgers is a true public university. It serves large numbers of first generation college students who are attending it. It has incredible range of different kinds of people from all over the world. And it is also a place that has a top graduate program. So Rutgers is a very valuable institution, and we want to make sure that it remains devoted to its true mission, which is teaching, research, and public service. And in order to do this, we have to envision a budget in which we prioritize the core functions of the university, supporting students and also supporting our workforce. Now, we might think about this moment in which Rutgers has essentially fired over 5% of its workforce in the context of what has happened this year. No other institution in New Jersey has had such brutal layoffs as Rutgers. Most of the other public higher education institutions in New Jersey have agreed to a moratorium on layoffs, and Rutgers is actually better funded. We had a restoration of our state funding on October 1st, 2020. So we've also received $54 million from the CARES Act last summer, and more recently, an even larger federal allotment. So it's not to say we don't have some financial consequences from the pandemic, but we also do have a lot of resources. Last spring, as others have spoken about, we proposed as a community a work share program to the Barchi administration, our previous president, and it would have saved, had it been acted upon in a timely manner, $100 million. It was modeled on a European model, a German model called Kurzarbeit. And the idea is that the federal government would provide monies so that workers would agree to stage furloughs and then would be reimbursed through federal monies and through state unemployment insurance. And in this way, everyone would be made whole. But we also were willing to take a collective sacrifice so that none of us would lose our jobs. Needless to say, the Barchi administration rejected this and instead chose this path of mass layoffs, and it recouped a pittance of what it would have from WorkShare. So that tells us that this battle is not just about economics, that it's really a question of power and what that power will be used for. So once again, we are proposing WorkShare. It would start this spring, and it would save millions of dollars. Unfortunately, the clock is also ticking, and we have not had an agreement from the central administration, and we really don't want to see another moment of lost opportunity. So what are the things that we are willing to exchange for a WorkShare program of staged furloughs of the other workers? Number one, a grad extension. Now, this is an extension in funding so that graduate students can complete their PhDs, but it's very important that they also be provided with healthcare insurance and tuition remission. So giving them a small pot of money without health insurance during a pandemic is unacceptable. So we want a graduate extension that follows the same parameters as do graduate student workers' jobs. Secondly, we had a cut of PTLs in the spring between 20 and 25% of our essential workforce of the PTLs were cut, and we want to see the PTLs rehired. As people on the call have spoken about so powerfully, PTLs are the core of undergraduate education. We have many longtime experienced teachers who play essential roles in the university, and we need them back. Finally, we want a guarantee of job security for all Rutgers workers until the end of 2021. We have a total of 30,000 workers at Rutgers, 20,000 that are union, 10,000 that are non-aligned, and we've already lost an enormous percentage of our workforce. We want them rehired, and we want a jobs guarantee. So I just wanted to end by thinking about the opportunity that presents us. So as we know, this has been the largest period of protest in the United States history. We've had between 16 and 25 million people this past year, going back to the spring, of course, of 2020. We had between 16 and 25 million go out onto the streets to protest in support of Black lives and more, and in a larger vision of what a compassionate response to this terrible moment of the pandemic means. So I think it's important that Rutgers is a very progressive university. It has a storied history, not only its age, but also as the home of Paul Robeson, the great African-Americanist communist, singer, and peace activist. Rutgers is also the home of women's history. A lot of the core scholarship for women's history was done here. We have one of the earliest Black studies programs, and Rutgers has truly been an intellectual and political leader. And that's what we want to see Rutgers be today. An opportunity is presenting itself for an innovative solution that would draw on the monies of the federal government. And very importantly, in a time when it's difficult to get federal funding, this is a way for our university to draw on that support and protect its workforce at the same time. A university is not just a place where people come to learn or receive degrees, it's also a major employer and is core to the communities in Rutgers, New Brunswick, Camden, and Newark, which are so-called majority minority, majority populations of color. And it's very important that we support these communities through these kinds of protections. So I just want to thank everyone who's been on the call today, and just to think about the power of our Coalition of Rutgers Unions, which covers 19 unions of 20,000 workers, and shows the importance of all of us working together in solidarity. Before I go, I want to make a quick announcement for an event that's going to happen this evening. At 7 o'clock, we are having a Freedom School, and it will be a discussion with the founders of the Scholars for a New Deal for Higher Education, who come from Rutgers, and we're going to have a really sustained discussion about this moment, this opportunity, and what it would look like to have a new deal for higher education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna, for highlighting everything that's happened over the last year and for, giving tangible, real solutions to this problem. I want to ask Howie to come on and ask their question that they dropped in the Q&A.
Hi, I'm Howie Swerdloff, and I'm a PTL in the writing program. In October of 2020, I was threatened with a layoff, and luckily the Coalition of Rutgers Unions came to my assistance, and with a campaign to pressure the administration to rehire us, and we were able to exert enough pressure that approximately half of us were rehired based on seniority. However, there are so many stories of injustice, of people still, being one semester away from having that seniority, and as you heard today from Josh and Tom, and not being rehired with no apparent reason, no apparent educational reason. So my question is, I keep reading in the newspaper about Rutgers hiring administrators who are making upwards of 6 figures, and supposedly there's a hiring freeze, and I can't understand the logic behind this. Can anybody help me to get a grasp of this apparent contradiction? Thanks.
Thank you, Howie. Would any of the panelists like to answer Howie's question? Basically, we're supposed to be experiencing a hiring freeze, and yet we have folks being hired, administrators being hired and getting paid 6-figure salaries. So how do we explain that? Christine, thank you.
So I think it's a question of priorities. I think the university has their priorities, and their priorities do not include the greater good. That includes community, that includes faculty, and that includes staff, right there. So when they elevate and promote and create new vice president positions, new vice provost positions out of thin air that have virtually no contact with the core mission of the university of students and research and service, it is very difficult to understand, to make sense of, and to explain. I think that we need together, in solidarity, we need to realign Rutgers' priorities.
Donna?
If I could just add something to Christine's remarks. You know, the United States has an incredible polarization of wealth. We know about that. And so it is also in our public university. So that, to give an example, our 312 top administrators make $65 million. Meanwhile, when I was talking about the 5% of workers that have been fired, many of them Black and brown, women of color, many of those workers make under $40,000 a year, a number around 30 to 32,000. Our graduate students also are making $28,000 a year, which is not a living wage. So I think that understanding that, the political economy of this, it is not simply a matter of not having the money. It is an issue about how those monies are being allocated. One of the most shocking things about Rutgers, I found, is that in this period of economic scarcity, so-called, there has been a 20% increase in the cost of the central administration from 2017 to 2019. And a big factor in that were $10,000 to $12,000 raises that were being given to the most senior administrators. We also know that Rutgers has hired a union-busting law firm, Jackson Lewis. And for the short period, I think it was from March 2018 to the spring of the pandemic, they paid Jackson Lewis over $2 million while they were firing PTLs for a maximum savings of $4 million. So I just want to emphasize Christine's point. This is about questions of power and governance, not about economic scarcity. The scarcity has been manufactured, but when the resources are wanted for other things, they are given. And these aren't just six-figure salaries. Many of these are in the upper six-figure salaries. So we want to be aware of that. You know, I support all of the different workforce at Rutgers, but we need to see, just like we need in the American economy, we need to see greater equity. We can't have all the pain in a deep blue state like New Jersey coming from people that make the least.
Thank you so much, Christine and Donna, for those incredible points. To wrap up today, you know, I've been a grad student at Rutgers University for about 3 years now, and I've been filled many roles, from research assistant to instructor on record to TA in a class of 150 students, and my role will pivot as necessary. It's interesting. And if anyone would like to jump in and add anything or any questions, please go on ahead. But it's definitely interesting to be in this historical moment, this national moment where, as Donna said, we're experiencing some of the largest, most long-term social justice organizing efforts that we've seen in a couple decades at this point. And we're also in the midst of a pandemic that we are still grappling with what the long-term effects are, whether they be, you know, economic and financial, or the long-term disability effects that people are going to be experiencing. Rutgers University, as Nicholas said, has the chance and the opportunity and the means to be standing on the right side of this. I am always going to be blown away by the solidarity of the folks in the coalition. I'm always going to be blown away by their resilience, by their tenacity and their ability to combat every decision that Rutgers has made over the last year or so. And I appreciate all of the insight that you guys gave today. Thank you so much.